In the living room, they found a skinned, decapitated, and otherwise mutilated corpse. Hello there and welcome, I hope you are well. My name is Gabby, and today's video we are talking about a woman who is quite notorious. If this is a case you haven't heard before, please prepare yourself for some quite graphic details. If you enjoy true crime, please consider subscribing to the channel. I release new videos every Monday and Friday. This is the horrific case of Katherine Knight. Katherine Knight was born in Tenterfield, Australia on the 24th of October 1955. Arguably, the seeds of what was to come were sown from the very beginning. Her father was a violent alcoholic who would rape her mother multiple times a day. Katherine later claimed that she herself was sexually abused by several relatives, although not her father, up to the age of 11. At school, Katherine was known for being prone to uncontrollably murderous rages over minor things and was a bully who terrorised smaller children. Despite her years of schooling, she remained illiterate and dropped out of school at 15 to work in a clothes factory. A year later, she moved on to working in a slaughterhouse, which she considered to be her dream job. In fact, she loved it so much that she took her first set of butcher's knives home with her and hung them over the bed in case she ever needed them. Her job was also where she met David Kellett, an alcoholic with a tendency to get into fistfights. Katherine was, however, accustomed to that sort of behaviour and soon surprised David when she joined in with one of his drunken brawls. Before long, Katherine was the one wearing the pants in the relationship, and in 1974 she convinced David to marry her, even though her own mother warned him right before the wedding that Katherine had a screw loose somewhere, saying, "You better watch this one or she'll fucking kill you. Stir her up the wrong way or do the wrong thing and you're fucked. Don't ever think of playing up on her, she'll fucking kill you." The warning was proven to be accurate very quickly indeed. Katherine attempted to strangle David on their wedding night, although he woke up and successfully fought her off. Despite this, the marriage unhappily continued for another 10 years and featured frequent infidelity by David and violent and destructive outbursts from Katherine. On one occasion, she burnt all his clothes and shoes before hitting him with a frying pan and fracturing his skull because he was late coming home from a darts competition after making the finals. The police wanted to press charges, but Katherine persuaded David to drop them. In May 1976, shortly after the birth of their daughter Melissa, David left Katherine for another woman and moved to Queensland. The next day, witnesses saw her violently pushing and swinging the pram with her baby in it down a busy street. Katherine was admitted to St Elmo's Hospital in Tamworth, where she spent several weeks after being diagnosed with postnatal depression. After being released, she went down to the railway, put 2-month-old Melissa on the tracks shortly before the train was due, then stole an axe and threatened several people with it. Melissa was rescued from the tracks by a passerby, known locally as Old Ted, who'd heard her crying, but Katherine didn't seem to care. She was arrested and sent back to St Elmo's but signed herself out the next day. A few days later, Katherine slashed a woman's face with a butcher's knife and demanded that she take her to Queensland so that she could find David. The woman was able to escape when they had to stop at a petrol station and the owner called the police. By the time they arrived, however, she'd taken a little boy hostage and was waving a knife in the air. The police were able to separate her from both the knife and the child by attacking her with broom handles and promptly arrested her. She was admitted to the Morisset Psychiatric Hospital and put under heavy sedation. On the 9th of August 1976, Katherine was released into the care of her mother-in-law, Jean, on the condition that she kept taking her medication. Despite everything, David took her back, the family living in Queensland, but the relationship was worse than ever. Katherine regularly flying into violent rages over nothing in particular and assaulting her husband with her fists and any object that she could get her hands on. Then in 1984, David came home from work to discover that Katherine had left him and returned to her parents' farm outside Aberdeen, taking their 2 children and anything else that wasn't nailed down with her. Katherine returned to using her maiden name and resumed working at the abattoir until a year later when she developed a bad back and was forced to give up work. After a string of unsuccessful relationships, Katherine met Dave Saunders in a local hotel in 1986. While the relationship went well for a few months, it wasn't long before Katherine started accusing Dave of cheating and throwing him out of the house only to beg him to come back again, which he always did. The fights soon turned violent, Katherine attacking Dave with her boots and fists. In May 1987, she killed his 2-month-old dingo puppy in front of him by slitting the pup's throat, just to let him know what she was capable of, before beating him unconscious with a frying pan. Despite this and a variety of other bizarre behaviour, David stayed with her, and in June the following year they had a daughter named Sarah. After Sarah's birth, things settled down and the couple bought a house which Katherine wasted no time in decorating to her liking. Cow hides, horns, antlers and skulls covered the walls alongside rusted animal traps, a taxidermied peacock and a baby deer were on prominent display. And the household's extensive video collection was primarily focused on horror and death. The piece didn't last, Katherine hitting Dave over the head with an iron and allegedly stabbing him with scissors. The final straw came when Dave returned home after a week away following a horrific fight to find that Katherine had cut up all his clothes and taken them to the tip. Dave left and pulled a vanishing act, taking his long service leave from the mine where he worked and avoiding all of his usual haunts. Katherine tried to find him, but after getting nowhere, eventually gave up. When he returned months later to see his daughter, he discovered that Katherine had somehow convinced the local police that he was the abusive one and got them to issue a apprehended violence order against him to keep him away from her and the kids. It didn't take Katherine long to find another man, an abattoir worker named John Chillingworth, and she fell pregnant with a son, Eric, within a few months of them getting together. Unlike Katherine's previous relationships, there were no known incidents of violence, but her relationship with John only lasted 3 years before it ended due to him finding out that she was seeing another man, minor John Charles Thomas Price, known to his friends as Pricey. Pricey was a divorced father of 3 who had custody of his 2 eldest children after his wife left and took the youngest with her. At first, his relationship with Katherine went smoothly, Katherine playing the part of doting and devoted spouse, and the 2 lots of kids getting along well enough. But eventually, things once again went south and fights started to become a common occurrence. However, this didn't prevent Katherine from moving in with Pricey. After he refused to marry her, she framed him for stealing things from work and got him fired. Pricey responded by kicking her out of the house the same day. Katherine returning to the dead animals adorned house she'd shared with Dave Saunders. However, a few months later, Pricey took her back, although he refused to allow her to move back in with him. The fights resumed with renewed venom. It wasn't long before Katherine once again had free reign of Pricey's 1-story home, but the fights continued to escalate in violence. In February 2000, a series of assaults which included Katherine trying to stab Pricey in the chest occurred. He went to the magistrate's court and took out an apprehended violence order against her to keep her away from his home, himself and his family. He previously told his co-workers that if he went missing, it would be because Katherine had killed him. On the 1st of March 2000, the day after Pricey had taken out the AVO, he didn't show up for work, and a neighbour noticed that his truck was still outside his house at 6 a.m. when he normally left well before then. When knocking on the house's doors and windows didn't get a response, the police were contacted and arrived at around 8 a.m. Upon forcing entry via the back door, they found what appeared to be an entire human skin hanging from a stainless steel meat hook at the top of the doorway leading from the kitchen to the living room. The skin extended from the top of the doorway right down to the floor. In the living room, they found a skinned, decapitated and otherwise mutilated corpse, along with a large amount of blood on the floor that led into the main bedroom, where Katherine Knight was snoring loudly on the double bed. When the police failed to wake her, she was removed from the house and taken to hospital by ambulance. In the home's kitchen, the police found a large pan on the stove, inside which was a skinless human head and a variety of vegetables, both cooked. Next to the pan was a baking dish containing the remains of what had been cooked in it. On the adjacent worktop were 2 plates on which were meals consisting of baked potato, baked pumpkin, courgette, cabbage, yellow squash, gravy, and unidentified cooked meat. Underneath each of the plates was a torn piece of kitchen paper on which were the names Jonathan and Beaky, the names of Pricey's 2 children who were fortunately away from the house on that night in question. On the dining room table there were a number of empty prescription medicine boxes. When Katherine woke up in hospital, she claimed to have no memory of the night before. However, between what she was willing to admit to remembering, the statements given by Pricey's neighbours, and the abundant physical evidence in the house, it wasn't long before a picture of what had happened emerged. On the night of the 29th of February 2000, Pricey had come home from work, followed his usual routine of checking in with his neighbours, then went to bed at around 11 p.m. Shortly after, Katherine arrived at the house and, despite the AVO, went inside, watched TV for a little bit, showered, then woke Pricey. They had sex, then he went back to bed. Katherine took one of her knives from beside the bed where she always kept them and stabbed Pricey 37 times. Going by the evidence, he woke up during the attack and tried to defend himself and flee, making it as far as the front door before succumbing to his injuries, while being stabbed the whole time. Katherine then dragged his body into the lounge and proceeded to skin him. A razor-sharp knife was inserted just under the collarbone and sliced horizontally from shoulder to shoulder, right under the clavicles, with anatomical precision. The knife was then used to cut down the chest over the stomach down to the groin, taking care to avoid Pricey's genitals. Katherine then cut down the front of his legs down to his feet. She then cut down the back of each of his arms and across the top of his head. She then peeled off his skin, including his face and hair, so that the entire thing came away in one piece, which she hung from the hook in the doorway. After that, she cut off his head right above the shoulders. Again, the cut was clean and precise, even though she would have been covered with blood. According to forensic pathologist Dr. Timothy Lyons, who performed the autopsy, the whole thing would have taken her about 40 minutes. She then cut off parts of Pricey's skinless corpse and took them into the kitchen to cook, the head going into the pan and the rest into the baking dish. Once the meat she had baked was cooked, she dished up 2 plates found in the kitchen and served herself some, although it's unclear how much she actually ate. She then took a large number of pills and passed out. Katherine was quickly charged with murder. According to court-appointed psychiatrists, she was perfectly sane when she committed the crimes, at least in the sense needed for her to be legally responsible for them. Her trial commenced in October 2001, but didn't get very far before reasons that remain unclear. Katherine changed her plea to guilty. On the 8th of November, Justice Barry O'Keefe sentenced Katherine Knight to life without the possibility of parole and ordered that her papers be marked with "never to be released," making her the first woman to be sentenced in that manner in Australian history. Despite her guilty plea, Katherine continues to maintain her innocence, refuses to accept responsibility for her actions, and claims that she has no memory of the night in question. She has tried to appeal her sentence, with the appeal being almost immediately denied. She is held at Silverwater Women's Correctional Centre. So that was the case of Katherine Knight. If this wasn't a case you had heard before, it definitely won't be one that you will forget. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a thumbs up, and if you have any thoughts, please share them in the comments. Please consider subscribing if you enjoy true crime. It'll be really much appreciated. But until I see you again, please be safe, be well, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.